Which brings me to the book, which is The Boy That Fell to Earth, which is the one that this is your most recent book.
Yes.
And it really, I mean, it is obviously fiction, but it really goes back to your own experience with your own, who was diagnosed at quite an early age.
3.
Yeah.
As having autism. Yeah.
How old is he now?
He's 22.
Okay, so how's he, what's he up to? How's he travelling now?
Well, he's, we got the diagnosis when he was 3, and when he was born, he was bright, he walked early, talked early, he was so advanced, and people kept saying, "Oh, he's so advanced." I'm thinking, oh, genius child. And then at about 13 months, it's like his computer crashed. He lost his language, he stopped eye contact, everything just went. They don't know, that's a very common story, but they don't know why it happens. That they have to be rebooted in some way. And so then, of course, I was rushing around seeing experts all the time. I thought, he's deaf, or what could it be? And then finally at 3 he got this diagnosis. And that is a diagnosis that drags you down into the dark. Autism. I mean, really, especially then, it was like, it almost felt to me like a death sentence.
Well, it's not curable.
No. It's a lifelong neurological disorder. I mean, its chief characteristics are an inability to communicate, socialise, chronic OCD, often very strong anxiety disorder, but often also a very high IQ. So even when the doctors were saying to me, oh, he might end up living in a home, he's got global delay, which is a nice way of saying he's retarded. When he got his language back after a lot of speech therapy, etc., he was about 4, he kept suddenly asking me the most interesting questions. I mean, for example, I was in the kitchen chopping up onions one day, and he said to me, "Mum, if onions make you cry, are there vegetables that make you happy?" And I thought, what a great question. And the next day he said to me, "Mum, what's the speed of dark?" And I'm like, oh, he's asking me all these things I could never answer. He's still like that.
Yeah.
So I had faith in him, even though nobody else did at the time. And schooling's a nightmare. I mean, getting help is a postcode lottery, and they put up kind of bureaucratic speed bumps to slow down a parent's progress because it's expensive to get help.
This is in the UK.
And here too, it's still hard. I mean, you really have to fight to get the right help. And I think putting a child with special needs into a mainstream school is...
Well, it just takes them back. It doesn't progress them. It doesn't give them any chance.
No, it's as pointless as giving a fish a bath.
Yeah.
And I know you do a lot of fundraising too.
Well, yeah, we've got sort of Giant Steps is the special needs school at Lanco, which is extraordinary. It's huge, but it's I can't think what the parents, what they would be like and how they would cope without having a school like that works on all those different areas of working on your speech and working on just processes, and also just having something for them to do, for the kids to actually know that there's a future, that they can actually achieve something.
Exactly. I mean, less than 15% with autism, people with autism are in the workforce, much lower than any other disability, even though they have this amazing IQ. My own son is Wikipedia with a pulse. I mean, he's a walking, talking dictionary, encyclopedia. And yet they're, so it's expensive to give early intervention, but if you can, they could contribute to society in the most fascinating way. I mean, we now know with diagnostic hindsight that Mozart and Einstein and Orwell and Van Gogh and all these incredible composers and musicians were on the autistic spectrum. Steve Jobs, definitely.
Yeah, David Helfgott we're talking about.
Exactly. So, I mean, they could give back incredibly if we could just have some faith in them and help them at that early age. But the other hard thing about having them in a mainstream school is the bullying. I mean, I remember when Jules came home when he was about 9 with tears in his eyes, and he had a sign on his back saying, "Kick me, I'm a retard." And he's saying to me, "Mum, what is a retard? The kids call me a retard. Am I a retard?" Well, you might as well have taken my heart out of my chest
and chopped it up.
Yeah. And of course,
how do you cope with that?
Some days I didn't cope. Some days I lay in the fetal position sobbing every morning, But you have to be strong for them. You turn into a lioness and your claws come out. But the difficult thing was too, I didn't talk about it. I did to my family and my friends, but I didn't want to invade my son's privacy. And it wasn't really till he was 21, and I started writing another funny book about the sex war, and this other book started pouring out of my pen about a single mother raising a child on the autistic spectrum, and I thought, this is the cathartic book.
Well, that's what I was just wondering. I was going to ask you why now, but that's
it just
why.
happened. And then I thought, well, I'll let the book stand on its own 2 literary legs. I won't talk about my own personal connection. But then a journalist asked me, actually from the Woman's Weekly, was it true? And I thought, well, I'm not going to lie, because if I lie, it looks like I'm embarrassed of him. And of course, the opposite is true. I'm so proud of him.
Yeah.
So I asked Jules what to do, and he was 21 at the time. He loves the book. He thinks it's a celebration of idiosyncrasies, eccentricities, and being different, is the way he says it.
So he obviously sees himself in there.
Yes, and a lot of him, even though it's fiction,
Yeah.
there's a lot of him in there. All the love letters the son writes to his mother, I pretty much took verbatim from letters Jules had written to me. So with his blessing, I very tentatively started talking about it. And I'm so candid, but I found it so hard to talk about something so deeply personal.
Yeah.
But now, of course, I'm so glad I have.
But there would be, I mean, I just know how difficult it is for parents, and I've seen, and I can't understand because I'm not in that situation, so you can only observe it, but I would have thought you'd be helping so many women because the fact of the isolation would be such a huge thing. And as the same for you, you said you could talk about it for years.
Yes.
And so to know that there is help, or you
there's
actually
a community out
and there's
there.
An ear, there's a sensitive ear that understands what you're going through.
Well, the reason I made her a single mother in the book was to emphasise the social isolation, because when you do have a child who's different...
Yeah, tell me about
Well,
that.
I used to call the sandbox the quick sandbox, because we'd go to the park, and as soon as my son did anything that was vaguely erratic or a little bit strange or whatever, other parents would glower at me as though I was a bad mother, and they'd pull their child away as though my son had leprosy and it was contagious. It also gets really heartbreaking when they're in their teens and all your friends' children are going off to do their gap year. They're going down, sailing down the Amazon, they're climbing Everest, they've got work experience in Vogue magazine or some top lawyer barrister's chambers. It's like being at an amazing banquet and you can smell the aroma wafting out and you're just outside starving with your nose pressed on the wall. It can be like that. But there's also a lot of humour, and what I tried to do in the novel was not just talk about the harrowing, heartbreaking side of things, but also how funny it is. Because, first of all, people on the autistic spectrum have no filter. They say whatever they're thinking.
Yeah, they just come straight into their head.
I mean, you're quite candid, I know, but there's people who they don't know how to put the brakes on. So socially, you feel that you're sweating more than Paris Hilton doing a Sudoku because you never know what your child is going to say. I mean, just some examples. I took Jules to Downing Street once when he was about 12 or something, and it was a charity fundraising event, and I introduced him to Tony Blair, and Julie's just looked at him and said, "Oh, yes, you're the one my mother calls Tony blah, blah, blah." And I'm just standing there going, I just did not know what to say. I know. And then for me not to know what to say, the mouth from the south. And then I took him to another event, some other fundraiser. I know. And there was an old battle axe Tory politician there called Anne Whittaker. Have you heard of her?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
And I introduced him to Anne Whittaker. Yeah. And the same thing. He said, "Oh, you're the one my mother says is two-faced. But if so, why are you wearing that one when it's all wrinkly and crinkly and old?" Once again.
Oh my God.
Shoot me now. And I wanted to capture a lot of the funny side too, because that's what parents have responded to.
It's funny. I mean, it's a moment that you can laugh afterwards because you think, "Oh my God, I can't believe that we're actually I'm in this situation," because we're so caught up with airs and graces and politically correctness.
I know.
And so, and I think Jules obviously challenges that. Yeah. But that really says something about how you have to be strong enough to kind of to cope with that.
Well, the worst time was when I had, I don't want to go for gold in the name-dropping Olympics, but I have to say the name of this famous actor so you understand the true horror of the scenario. Okay, I had Hugh Jackman for dinner years ago. He was just on the cusp of fame, and we have mutual friends, and he came for dinner, and I'm flirting for Australia. I mean, we're getting on so well. In my mind, we've already eloped and we're living in the Caribbean. And then Jules got home and he must have been about 14 or so, maybe 13, 14. And anyway, I jumped up and hugged him and said, "Oh, hi, Jules," gave him a big hug. And I said, "Oh, look, darling, you're growing a moustache." And he just scrutinised me and said, "Well, so are you, Mum. Look at all those hairs on your top lip. There's quite a few on your chin as well." And started counting them and everything. And I'm like, it was like a contraceptive arriving on a plate. And Hugh lost interest in me and that was the end of that. And I'm like, "Thanks, darling. Thanks for sharing." So, but in another way, how fabulous to have someone who can only tell the truth. You
it's
know,
unusual.
It's like truth serum.
Yeah.
But I did want to use, the way I use the humour in the book is when the mother starts dating again, when she's trying to find a new boyfriend or whatever. Every time she finds someone who's she thinks could be a potential partner, the son accidentally sabotages the relationship by just telling the truth. So I've woven the humour in a lot that way. And parents always write to me and say, "Thank God you made it funny, not all doom and gloom."
Oh God, yeah. Well, you'd have to. I mean, life has its light and dark, and you've got to bring that into it, which you're so good at doing.